we have learned more about the motives of China investing in Africa. But what are the effects? We will look at the downside and the upside of China investing. We've invited two experts on these fields to give their opinion. First, we will start with the positive sides, and then the negative.
In the last years, Chinese investments and trade flows between Africa and China increased on a constant pathway, in so much as expectations had to be reviewed, even if someone said that Europe was going to be the commercial partner for Africa. Now, there are no doubts. Africa's partner is China. This huge investment plan was effectively called Chinese Marshall Plan, because of both its massive effort and it being agreed with local governments. If in the past China closed the door of development to Africa, when outsourcing had chosen Asia, now it's giving a development possibility. But how could Africa take advantage from this situation? First of all, China's run to resources increased raw material prices, primary source of funds for many African governments, inverting a tendency in decreasing of decades. Leaving apart the discussions about corruption, conflicts and politics involved in general, with being rich in terms of natural resources, Africa will benefit from this only if the governments will succeed in managing the surpluses and in toning down the effects of different periods that characterize raw material markets. And this means investments in infrastructure, saving for bear market phases, and have a clear accountability system that can avoid corruption. China is also filling Africa's technological and infrastructural gaps little by little, importing technology, adapting this technology, as India did, to Africa's needs instead of the Western needs, because of the similar socio-economic and environmental contexts. It's applied in many productive sectors as agronomic knowledge in agriculture, results of the green revolution that leads Asian growth, where in many countries rice is being introduced. Other examples are the fertilizers and modern techniques in general. China is also building infrastructures of every kind in almost every African country, also where natural resources lack. On agreement with the local government, Chinese engineers project railways, highways, hospitals and so forth. They are built on place by high-skilled Chinese teams. This avoided the lack of control and accountability that characterized the international community's programs that wasted lots of money in the last 50 years and could really fill the infrastructural and knowledge gap that characterized Africa's economy, and that is one of the levers for starting growth. China is also filling a structural problem of the African economy, the lack of private savings and consequentially of investment. FDI was inconsistent in the past because it lacked political stability and trust in general, that could have made Africa a good place where to outsource. As research showed, Africans too didn't invest in Africa, because they didn't trust the system and in the projects. But Chinese firms, thanks to diplomatic relationships and to abundance of funds, are filling this gap. If this tendency will continue, maybe it will be possible to break the poverty trap, as known in literature, and Africa could start growing on its own. Switching the attention to trade, Africa could benefit from the intensification in commercial relations with China in two ways. First, cheap consumer goods are breaking in the domestic market with a non-negligible humanitarian effect. And second, a hope for the future that Africa could benefit from exports in large with the Chinese market, not only because of the raw materials.
Cina e Africa di un più vasto mercato per I prodotti africani.
I would like to welcome Professor Schweske to the University of Rotterdam.
Nun, ich habe kürzlich das Interview mit Herrn Professor Motta gesehen.
I saw the interview with Professor Motta, but he only emphasizes the positive effects of the Chinese foreign direct investments in Africa. He forgets about the negative effects, because it does not only bring prosperity to Africa. For example, there are major concerns about the conditions of the Zambian workers who work in the coal mines for the Chinese, because there's a lack of safety regulations. The Chinese do not care about the well-being of the African workers. There are no labor laws they have to think about, and there are no environmental considerations either. Moreover, there is a serious concern about whether the import of China's investment will in the long term add value in the sense of education and opportunities for the Africans, and if there is a substantial technology transfer in this way. China especially invests in the countries that are rich of natural resources, and sometimes they do make those countries poles of growth, and leaving the other countries poles of stagnation. China's investment is largely concentrated in export-oriented industries, which are closely related to the raw materials, not making Africa less dependent of raw materials. The Chinese firms that invest usually have an economies of scale advantage. In this way, they exclude the native producers and drive them out of business. This can also cause the receiving countries to lose aspects of their national sovereignty and control over their economic policy. The Chinese firms can avoid taxes by shifting the profits abroad, so there's no tax revenue for the guest country either. Because the Chinese firms care most about making profits, they may utilize the scarce resources poorly. They may exploit the resources too quick and shipping out the resources instead of adding value to them. Professor Thirlwall showed that if profits the Chinese firm make are sent back to China, the impact of the FDI on the balance of payments must be negative, unless the gross inflow of FDIs grows substantially from year to year, with all the consequences this can have for the development of the African countries in the future.
Die starke Ressourcenvorkommen haben.